Meghan is livid. Harry has met someone who is his age, with whom he is in love, and who is in love with him.
There are some royal stories that become huge because someone reveals a fact, and then there are stories that become huge because someone makes a claim that leaves the public asking a much bigger question. That is exactly where the latest controversy surrounding Prince Harry begins. A claim associated with Lady Colin Campbell has reignited speculation about Harry's private life and, more specifically, the possibility that another woman may have entered the picture. At first glance, the story sounds simple. Harry has a new girlfriend. Lady C has revealed it. And suddenly, one of the biggest questions surrounding the Sussexes appears to have an answer. But there is a problem. The available material does not independently establish that Prince Harry has a new girlfriend. There is no confirmed relationship announcement presented here. There is no independently verified identity of another woman. And there is no evidence in the material we have that allows us to state the claim as an established fact. So if that is the case, why has this story created so much curiosity? Why does a suggestion about Harry's private life immediately become such a major royal talking point? And perhaps the most important question of all, are people reacting to something that has actually been revealed, or to the possibility that something has been revealed? That distinction may sound small. It isn't, because once you separate the claim from what can actually be established, the entire story starts to look very different. And that is where this story gets much more interesting. For years, Prince Harry's romantic life has attracted extraordinary public attention. Long before his marriage, people were fascinated by who Harry would eventually choose. His relationships were discussed publicly. His friendships were analyzed. His dating life became part of the larger royal narrative surrounding him. Then came Meghan Markle. Their relationship quickly became one of the most recognizable royal romances in the world. Eventually came marriage, a new family life, and a dramatic change in Harry's relationship with the institution he had been born into. Then came another chapter. Harry and Meghan stepped away from senior royal duties. Their lives increasingly moved outside the traditional royal environment. Their public statements became more prominent. Their disagreements with sections of the media became part of their story, and their relationship with the wider royal family became a subject of constant public discussion. All of that history matters. Because when a new claim about Harry's personal life appears, people do not look at it as an isolated rumor. They immediately connect it to everything that has happened before. They start asking what it means for his marriage. They ask whether it could affect his public image. They ask whether there is something happening privately that the public has not been told. And that is how a single claim can become an enormous story. But before we go any further, there is something we need to establish. Lady Colin Campbell has been a prominent and controversial voice in royal commentary for years. Her comments about members of the British royal family have attracted substantial public attention. She has discussed Harry and Meghan before, and her statements are frequently picked up and debated by royal audiences. That makes her a significant part of the conversation. But being a prominent commentator and providing independently verified evidence are not necessarily the same thing. That distinction becomes particularly important when the subject is somebody's private relationship. Because there are several stages between a claim and a confirmed fact. Someone can make a statement, another outlet can report that statement. A video can discuss the report. Social media users can repeat the video. And eventually, thousands of people may hear the story as though the underlying claim has already been independently proven. But repetition does not automatically create evidence. A story being widely discussed does not necessarily mean the central allegation has been confirmed. And that is exactly why this Harry story requires caution. Imagine for a moment how quickly the headline can evolve. It begins with a suggestion about Harry's private life. Then the suggestion becomes a report. The report becomes a headline, the headline becomes a thumbnail, and the thumbnail becomes something that looks almost like an announcement. Suddenly, the viewer is no longer asking whether the claim is true. The viewer is asking, who is the woman? That is a very different question, and it is precisely where curiosity can outrun evidence. The original uncertainty disappears. The audience assumes the relationship already exists. The only mystery left seems to be the identity of the woman. But based on the material available here, that conclusion goes too far. What we actually have is a claim that has generated speculation, and that means the real investigation has to begin with the claim itself. So let's ask the most basic question. If there is supposedly a new relationship, where is the independent confirmation? Has Harry announced one? Has Meghan confirmed a separation? Has an identified woman publicly acknowledged such a relationship? Has reliable independent evidence established it? The material provided for this story does not answer those questions, and that matters, because the difference between a relationship has been confirmed and there is speculation about a relationship is enormous. One is a factual development, the other is an unresolved story. And when it comes to public figures, especially people as recognizable as Harry and Meghan, that line should never be ignored. But here is where things become more complicated. Even if the relationship itself remains unconfirmed, the public reaction tells us something. It tells us that Harry's private life still carries enormous emotional weight. Why? Because Harry is no longer simply viewed as a young royal navigating his personal life. His relationships have become part of a much larger cultural argument. For some people, Harry represents independence from the traditional royal system. For others, he represents someone who remains deeply connected to that same institution despite leaving senior duties. For some, the Sussex story is primarily about family. For others, it is about the media. For others still, it is about privacy, public accountability, and the consequences of stepping away from royal expectations. So when a rumor involving Harry's romantic life appears, it touches all of those existing debates at once. That is why the story can become so emotionally charged even before the underlying claim has been proven. And there is another reason the phrase secret girlfriend is so powerful. It creates a hidden story. It suggests that something exists behind the public narrative. It implies that people may have missed clues. It makes the audience feel that there is another chapter waiting to be discovered. That is an extremely powerful storytelling mechanism, but it can also be misleading if the word secret is treated as proof. A secret is still a claim until evidence establishes it. A revelation is still a statement until the underlying information can be verified. And speculation remains speculation even when thousands of people are discussing it. This is especially important because Harry himself has spent years speaking about privacy and media intrusion. That creates an unavoidable tension. The public wants information. Harry has repeatedly emphasized the importance of privacy. And the more private the subject becomes, the more fascinating it can appear to people watching from the outside. Think about the contradiction. Harry has publicly discussed the consequences of intense media attention. He has spoken about his difficult relationship with sections of the press. He has pursued legal action involving media organizations. He has described the personal consequences of media scrutiny, yet his own life continues to attract enormous public fascination. His marriage is discussed. His family is discussed. His relationship with the royal family is discussed. And now even an unconfirmed suggestion about his romantic life can generate a fresh wave of attention. This is the cycle. Privacy creates mystery. Mystery creates speculation. Speculation creates coverage. Coverage creates more attention. And more attention creates an even stronger demand for privacy. That cycle is almost impossible to escape once someone becomes as famous as Harry. But there is another question hiding underneath all of this. What would actually change if the claim were true? That is where the story becomes much larger. If Harry were genuinely involved in another relationship, it would not simply be a celebrity dating story. It would raise questions about his marriage. It would affect public perceptions of the Sussexes. It could reignite discussions about Harry's relationship with the royal family. And it could completely change how some people interpret previous events. But there is a crucial word in that entire paragraph: if. We can examine the consequences of a hypothetical event without pretending that event has already happened. That distinction allows us to discuss why the claim matters, while still respecting what the evidence actually establishes. And right now, the available material does not establish the central allegation as fact. This is also why the identity of the alleged woman is not actually the most important part of the story. People naturally want a name, they want a photograph, they want a timeline. They want to know when the relationship supposedly began. They want to know whether Harry and this person were seen together. They want to know whether Meghan knows. They want to know whether the royal family knows. But every one of those questions depends on the first question being answered. Is there a verified relationship at all? Without that foundation, everything else becomes speculation built on speculation. And that is how a story can become much larger than the evidence supporting it. There is another important factor here. Harry has already experienced what happens when his personal life becomes a public narrative. His relationships have not simply been treated as private matters. They have been connected to royal expectations, family tensions, media coverage, and public opinion. That means a claim about another relationship does not land on an empty page. It lands on top of years of existing controversy. People bring their previous opinions with them. Someone who already believes Harry and Meghan are deeply unhappy may interpret the claim one way. Someone who strongly supports the Sussexes may interpret it another way. Someone skeptical of royal commentators may dismiss it immediately, and someone fascinated by royal drama may simply want to know whether there is another hidden chapter. The same claim can therefore produce completely different interpretations. That is why separating fact from interpretation is so important. And now we reach the point where this story deserves a serious rehook, because until now, it would be easy to think the story is simply about a possible girlfriend. But that may be the least interesting part. The deeper issue is who controls the narrative surrounding Harry's private life. For years, different voices have attempted to define Harry. The palace had one narrative, the press had another. Harry and Meghan have offered their own explanations, commentators have supplied interpretations, and audiences have formed their own conclusions. The result is not one Harry story. It is several competing versions of Harry's story. And whenever a new claim appears, it enters that already crowded battlefield. That means the latest controversy is not simply asking, does Harry have another relationship? It is also asking, which version of Harry's life should the public believe? And that is a much harder question to answer. Because facts are usually much simpler than narratives. A verified relationship announcement would be a fact. A public statement from the people involved would be evidence. Independent reporting from credible sources could add confirmation, but a commentator's suggestion, followed by online repetition, belongs in a different category. It may be worth discussing, it may be worth examining, it may even eventually lead to something that can be confirmed. But until that happens, it should not be presented as established reality. That is particularly important when the people involved are living human beings whose marriages, reputations, and families can be affected by public speculation. Now consider what could happen next. There are several possibilities. The first is that further credible information appears. If that happens, the story could change dramatically. The second possibility is that the claim remains unsupported. In that case, the controversy may continue largely because people keep repeating the original suggestion. The third possibility is that the story evolves into something completely different. Perhaps the public focus shifts away from an alleged relationship and toward the broader issue of Harry's private life. Or perhaps another piece of information changes how the original claim is understood. That uncertainty is precisely what keeps the story alive. Because at the moment, there is no definitive ending. There is only an unanswered question. That brings us to the emotional side of this story. For Harry, the issue of privacy has never been a simple one. He is a public figure. He was born into one of the world's most famous families. His marriage became globally significant. His disagreements with the media became part of his public identity. And his decision to step away from senior royal duties made him even more interesting to millions of people. But fame creates a strange contradiction. The more someone tries to control what the public sees, the more interested people can become in what they are not seeing. That does not mean every rumor is true. It means secrecy itself can become part of the fascination, and that may be exactly what is happening here. There is also a human question that gets lost when these stories become headlines. What does it actually feel like to have your private life constantly interpreted by millions of strangers? Imagine every photograph becoming a clue, every appearance becoming evidence, every silence becoming suspicious, every change in behavior becoming a theory. That is the environment surrounding people at Harry's level of fame. And once that environment exists, it becomes almost impossible to distinguish genuine information from assumptions, unless the evidence is clear. This is why the strongest version of this story is not the one that pretends to know everything. It is the one that acknowledges what is known, what has been claimed, and what remains unanswered. So let's return to the original question. Is Harry's biggest secret really out? Based on the material available here, we cannot responsibly say that it is. There is a claim associated with Lady Colin Campbell. There is renewed speculation. There is enormous public curiosity. But there is not enough evidence presented here to confirm that Prince Harry has a new girlfriend. And that changes the story completely. Because instead of a confirmed royal bombshell, we have a developing controversy surrounding a claim. The distinction may not be as dramatic as a headline, but it is far more important. And yet, there is still a fascinating question left behind. Why does a story like this become so powerful? Because Harry's personal life represents much more than romance. It represents the continuing struggle between public interest and private boundaries. It represents the enormous power of royal narratives. It represents the way a single claim can become a global conversation, and it represents something else as well. The public has become accustomed to receiving instant answers, but some stories simply do not have instant answers. Sometimes there is a claim, then there is investigation, then there is confirmation, or there isn't, and until that final step happens, certainty is impossible.
Perhaps that is the most important lesson from this entire controversy. A dramatic headline can tell you what someone wants you to believe. Evidence tells you what you actually know. Those are not always the same thing. And when the subject is Prince Harry, the difference can become enormous. Because whatever your opinion of Harry, Meghan, the royal family, Lady Colin Campbell, or the media, one principle remains the same. A claim should not become a fact simply because it is repeated often enough. If a genuine new relationship exists, credible evidence will eventually have to emerge. If it does not, the story may eventually fade. And if something else is happening behind the scenes, the public may only understand it when reliable information becomes available. Until then, the mystery remains. There is one final irony here. Harry has spent years trying to tell his own story. He has spoken publicly, he has shared deeply personal experiences, he has challenged media narratives, he has defended his family's privacy. Yet even after all of that, the public remains fascinated by the things he has not explained. That may be the hardest part of fame. You can tell your story, you can correct the record, you can reveal things you once wanted to keep private, and still, the unanswered questions can become more powerful than the answers. That is exactly what has happened here. The alleged girlfriend may or may not exist. The claim may develop. It may disappear. It may eventually be confirmed or completely rejected. But for now, there is no responsible basis for pretending the mystery has already been solved.
Perhaps the better question is, why are so many people ready to believe that there must be one? Is it because Harry's private life has become so closely connected to the wider royal drama? Is it because audiences have become accustomed to hidden revelations? Is it because people believe there are still unanswered questions surrounding the Sussexes? Or is it simply the irresistible power of a story that promises to reveal something the public was never supposed to know? Whatever the answer, one thing is clear. The most important part of this story is not the loudest claim. It is the evidence behind it. And until that evidence appears, the mystery remains exactly that, a mystery. So if another credible development emerges, that is when the story will truly change. Because the difference between a rumor that sounds convincing and a fact that can be proven may be only a few words in a headline. But when it comes to Harry's private life, those few words can change the entire story. And perhaps that is the question worth leaving with.